Welcome. We are January 21. This is K8s-Infra meeting. As remember, this is under the code of conduct, so like always, be kind to each other. And welcome to the first meeting of the year. So let's start. I don't think we have any new people or people interested to introduce themselves. Okay, let's start with the billing report. Do we have a note taker, by the way?
Yeah, I can take notes.
Okay. So we end of January, so I'm just checking the span of this month. I noticed two things. Okay, not notice. More like one thing is Clad Armor changed the SQ, so we have a saving of $200 per month.
Yeah, it wasn't a change in the SKUs. It's because I made a change in Cloud Armor. So some time ago, so Cloud Armor has basically two ways to pay for it. Like there's a pay-as-you-go or there's a subscription, right? Last year, what they did was introduce a interesting subscription option as well, because it used to be like 3K a year and then unlimited requests. And then they introduced this cheaper option, which is like $200 per month with unlimited requests. You just pay for the bandwidth that goes through it, but in our use case, there's hardly any bandwidth. What's insane is we pay more for logs than we pay for running Cloud Run. It's interesting. But yeah, that change like reduces the cloud armor costs substantially.
Sorry, what did you change?
So I signed up for a pay-as-you-go subscription for that specific project only. So on a monthly basis, you pay like $200 and it covers the entire cloud arm usage. Instead of paying for every request.
Nice. Okay. And that's for the registry.
We get a production project, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Oh, so it's like, okay. Can we get a ping next time? We do some kind of this kind of change because I was confused, like what happened?
Yeah, okay. I have plans for some other changes, but they kind of need a longer discussion, given that they have a serious financial impact.
Okay.
That's great though.
Yeah, we have two more artifact registry repository, so there's gonna be an increase in the storage. I don't suspect it's gonna be big increase. So yeah, because we roll out the registry in Germany and there's like 2 GCP regions, so I think we should be fine. We'll see what's happening in terms of costs. I think maybe in 2 weeks we'll see we can get the cost of that on the air. I'm also doing that because we have a really big cost on AWS. We have like 3 regions and we are serving, we have 3 regions and we serve those 3 regions from one AWS region, which is kind of unfair, specifically Frankfurt. So with GCP opening in a region in Germany, I decided to basically roll out registry there and see what's happening. Should be interesting. So I think, in the billing review of the next month, we should see some change, hopefully.
That should only matter though for traffic we can't identify as coming from Amazon. That is in fact coming from Amazon, because otherwise it's just egress, right?
Yeah, it's mostly
like it'll be egress either way. But if it's within data center, we don't need more GCP regions. We just need it in the mapping.
The problem is any infrastructure in Germany was going outside of Germany and in different basically GCP endpoint to pull from. So and we were like paying for that.
Are you saying
because we had
the AWS regions will have different egress costs for that traffic?
Yeah, the thing is we didn't have basically any cloud run service in Germany at all. So basically the any AWS instance running in Germany, the egress for pooling there was significant.
On which bill?
The AWS bill.
Right, but if it was traffic in AWS, we should be able to serve in that region without GCP regions. Like buckets don't have to be one-to-one to regions. We have
My
region
understanding is
mapping.
that it hits the adjacent regions and it serves out of their corresponding AWS regions, which is not Germany. And
Yeah.
Right,
drives
but
costs.
what I'm saying is adding an AWS Germany region isn't blocked on adding GCP regions, so it doesn't follow.
No, I basically added a GCP region, not an AWS region.
Right, but if we
I
want to,
deploy on a GCP region.
but I thought you were saying that we're unnecessarily serving cross-region AWS traffic, and to reduce cross-region AWS traffic, what we need is more Amazon buckets
Also, where we
or
deploy the
CloudFront.
where we deploy the S3 bucket, we should also deploy a cloud run service if possible.
But they don't have to be strictly one-to-one. We can have more buckets than Cloud Run regions. It will just only apply for detected Amazon traffic.
In this case, what I did is basically roll out a cloud run service close to a S3 bucket, like in the same region. So the traffic from AWS will be inside AWS if the request is coming from AWS region.
I don't want to take up the whole call. We can follow up offline.
Okay.
Was there anything else you wanted to go over with the billing report?
No, I think we're fine for this month on GCP. I don't exactly. I don't really unless someone saw something weird about GCP. I don't see anything different, so we can switch to AWS.
I also just want to point out quickly that we've the I folks have been recurringly posting the like very high level spend trends in the SIG K8s-Infra Slack. So we mostly need this for drilling into specific changes if we see any. From a like broad perspective, everything looks good, and you can see that data in the Slack posted weekly.
Okay. Do we have something to say about AWS? Costs are mostly the same.
I can add a thing or two quickly. EKS Pro build cost.
Sorry, about cost or about basically environment?
About cost.
Okay.
Yeah, we are expecting to see for EKS Pro build cluster decrease in bill for like 4K monthly because we fixed some issues that we had. We are also expecting to see significant decrease for Boscos accounts because we were leaking a lot of EKS clusters and that accumulated a lot of charges. So we hope to see that down. And we are seeing some uptick in usage for packages K8s-IO. A lot of folks are like, we have a lot of more traffic, but it's still in reasonable amount of 1.5K monthly, so it's fine.
We also got low on the amount of credit available, but I believe that was resolved yesterday.
Any question?
I heard there was a change in Amazon's approach for issuing credits. Are they issuing it on a yearly basis now, or is it still a monthly basis?
I think it's I would say ask James, but I think it's mostly a change in our approval process.
Okay, so what do you see in the account then if you click it?
Yeah, they're still, as far as I know, they're still not depositing like a year at a time. It's in tranches, and
Yeah, it's 10 trenches,
we got
and
low on one, and they had some issue with the internal processes, but they got it resolved in time. And I don't
Okay,
think we have
yeah.
more specifics than that.
Yeah, I think my understanding is basically more like a change in the approval process. So now I don't have the specific talk to them about this. I think a request to increase the monthly donation, but we didn't get any feedback about that. So either reach out to Mira or James about this. Anything else? Okay.
I think the billing's looking pretty good right now.
Ben, you first for the open discussions.
Okay. We've talked about this over time, and it's recently come back up because of the next item where we're talking about the PROW migration. This will be a blocker for actually finishing it. I have not made any progress on this, but I think this is just kind of general as a SIG. We really should find somewhere that we can officially write down some policy to make clear what the expectations are around the resources that we manage. We've been saying for a while now that we're trying to finish getting rid of depending on like internal Google projects and that sort of thing. But we have the additional wrinkle that we indirectly depend on other companies' internal stuff because those credentials were added to the Google managed clusters. Whereas SIG K8s-Infra and SIG testing as of thus far would be disinclined to add credentials we don't know anything about to accounts we don't know anything about with budgets we don't know anything about, provision outside of the project. Everything that we're running right now, we provisioned service accounts and so on as a community, as a SIG, and have stood up, and we have at least some degree of documentation. Any automation that we can is checked in, like a very open process. We have some credentials in the google.com PROW cluster that were done through another process to just let the Google team get out of the way and let community add things, but that allowed some things to be added that aren't actually from the project and we don't know about. In particular, there's an Azure credential. We, as a project, as a community, don't have any agreement with Azure. We have no idea what's a reasonable use for that, how much it costs, how much it's allowed to cost, anything like that. And we can't manage the account or provision it again. It's just a service account in a secret in a cluster. And we have a similar one for a vCenter instance. So we've been reaching out informally for a while now to representatives from these groups to try to highlight that like this is not a good place to be in, and that we intend to finish getting rid of the Google clusters at some point, and we don't intend to just like copy forward these credentials we don't know anything about. But it would be good to have some hammered out, written down policy to point to before we actually reach to spin that down. That said, as a project, ignoring the Googler part for a minute, as a project, we don't control that anyhow. These credentials only exist in the cluster that's running inside of google.com. We already have not done that on internal ones. And I mean, at any point that cluster could be shut down. And the whole point is, I mean, the SIG K8s-Infra, SIG testing, and the Kubernetes project don't actually control this. And that's why we're trying to finish getting away from it. So I believe a couple of the other policies or a couple other vendors listed here are not in that case. We're either not using them currently, or we are, and CNCF actually does provide the resources, and maybe we need to do a little bit better about handling it through K8s-Infra, but they are actually coming through the CNCF. DigitalOcean, I believe we discovered, is on that list, for example. So there's a breakdown in the channel about jobs that will be migrated or we're planning to migrate and haven't, that Ricky wrote. And if you look, there are just a couple of these mysterious credentials that we don't have an equivalent to in the community cluster. Sorting that out will be one of the last things blocking us being able to move the control plane, because the community run control plane will not be able to access internal Google projects, and therefore not the build cluster and not the secrets in the build cluster. So with that in mind, we should figure out how we want to handle this and finish communicating this to any parties that may be affected, before we can move forward with the next, with, I guess, finishing the next topic. We won't be able to finally move over Prow without being able to cut off the internal cluster, which means cutting off those jobs that depend on those internal, or depend on those credentials that only exist in that cluster, as opposed to every other job where we've been able to migrate to some community stood up clean infrastructure that is understood and provided by K8s-Infra. So unless anybody has questions, I think we should probably circle back to that and move to the Prow migration plan, which is sort of a superset of this.
Before we move on, right? How far are we from articulating a policy and sharing it with the wider project?
I think until we identify, which project are basically use those credentials. I think the first AI is to move remaining project eligible for migration before we issue a policy.
I don't think those are related. We've discussed for a while, and various forums this, and I think there's been some general agreement on what it should look like. What we don't have is here we'll put PR something here. That's not overly clear. The closest prior art is there's a documentation in SIG release about release blocking jobs as managed by the release team and the requirements for inclusion there, and that touches on some of this. We don't even have like a starting for this, so we'll have to establish one, and it doesn't fit into something like I don't think it you could maybe shoehorn it into the SIG charter, but there just isn't like a great for that. So we'll have to settle on somewhere acceptable to actually put it and then craft language. I think Bob actually had a draft based on our discussions to help us have a starting point. But that's about
I can drop a link
have.
to that one sec.
Yeah,
All
but
right. Sounds great. My next question is, when can I have a tangible thing in our hands to show somebody? Say, all right, here's a policy we're rolling out on the X.
So if we can decide on a place to put it, we can start from that draft and do that whenever. I haven't had more time to follow up on that. Also, I'm not sure it's the biggest thing, because we are only talking concretely of, even if we didn't have a policy written down, that's sort of like a nice to have, because we're not talking about like 20 different groups here. We're talking about 2 sets of Prow jobs, I believe we've narrowed it down to, that we need to deal with. Everything else is already de facto in compliance. Like everything else we've been able to migrate because it is running on things that we have set up as a project with equivalent replaces provided by the project. We only have 2 sets of jobs where we can't do that. The third one was DigitalOcean, and we discovered that one we will be able to, because the CNCF does control that account. So we should follow up with them to set up a clean credential from that, but it's not one we don't know about. So we really need to talk to these 2 groups. Bob?
Bob.
Two things. Regarding Chief gave me an update regarding the DigitalOcean stuff. He just says like it's not lost, it's just low on the priority of things right now. I think like when it becomes more of an urgent thing, he will be able to spend some time and dig it up. They don't have like a, unfortunately, it's one of those things that's kind of like lost in the history of things. The other thing, going back to the infrastructure policy and things like that, we do have like beyond the proud jobs and everything, there's I'd say a collection of sub projects that sort of are running their own sort of testing infra. Like Minikube, probably the biggest example that I can think of, where they have a Jenkins box running somewhere inside Google that is talking to, I believe, Equinix. And there's a couple other projects in K-SIGs like that.
So far we've taken the stance that we're not forcing any projects to use our infrastructure, but if they'd like to use our infrastructure, then we set some of the terms.
Yeah.
And then that tends to transitively be through SIG testing if we're talking about CI, which is one of the most common ones.
I think the main thing,
but like
at
if
least,
they want to use GitHub Actions or something, right? Those are not project provisioned, and like that's fine. We might even make recommendations, but I don't think we've currently been moving to set hard policies, say like you can't do this or
the main thing, at least with some of these, is it's all tied to like individual accounts or tied into corporate things.
That's true, and I think it's worth following up. But the thing that the reason we're bringing this particular one up is it's sort of a touch point on finishing the things that we are trying to run, and also that we don't want to make the things that we're running dependent on it. If if some other SIG doesn't work with SIG K8s-Infra and chooses to run everything totally on their own from some other sources, that's not great. But it doesn't make the situation worse for the things we are running. This makes the situation worse for the things we're already trying to manage. Like, for example, making it difficult for us to orchestrate migrating Prow because we need to figure out what to do with this build cluster we don't own. And we can't deal with that because it in turn depends on other things we don't own. Yeah, resolving that. I mean, there is another option, which is just we like blindly copy forward credentials we don't know anything about. That's also not a great place to be in, though. We kind of have to pick one and deal with it. I hear you on that. No, I know, for example, that Minikube has a couple of things that are also Google internal, but like entirely off to the side from the rest of the project's infrastructure. Arno?
Yeah, I think I have like one question is like, do we consider that as a blocker for the migration?
Which?
Basically the Prow migration. Do we consider the project migration as a blocker for the Prow migration?
Yes, because I mean, if we don't, we should probably just talk about Prow migration, but very briefly, it's not super feasible to migrate Prow and like leave the old one around or something like that. That's going to cause problem. It's not really designed to have multiple on one repo. And we can't move the control plane without cutting the dependency on the build cluster. And then the build cluster has those secrets.
Okay, so I'm asking the question because we have that question in the migration plan. So I'm like, maybe we want to really get a TLDR and open the conversation. So
yeah,
Michelle,
I think it would be helpful to let Michelle talk about the Prow migration for a bit, and we can come back to this one with that understanding if we need.
Okay.
Yeah, my spiel on this is probably going to be pretty brief because again, I'm I'm trying to act as like a point of contact and make sure that this stays moving along. But also like my expertise is a little less in Prow and a little bit more on some other stuff in testing. In any case, I think the goal is there's already some stuff on like community clusters and whatnot for jobs or the resources. But the main thing here is moving the control plane for Prow, the stuff that actually handles all of the like job triggering or responses or scheduling or stuff like that, over to community-owned infrastructure. So I think this doc has two purposes, one of which is just to collect like what are the things that we definitely want to have answers for, and like timeline and points of friction and all of that. And then the second of which is to actually outline a plan and timeline for like how do we reasonably start migrating things over from one control plane to another. I think the current most like loose plan would be to establish like the Proud control plane and all the necessary components in a community-owned project, and then figure out how we do proper like cutting over all of the jobs, validating that switching over which Prow is acting on a particular repo, go repo by repo, and then like also have like validation and all of that in order to make sure that a migration from one to the other is going smoothly. And then that comes with some of the stuff around like if jobs need to migrate over, what do we do about like the ones that have credentials or the resources that need to be migrated over as well? Is this blocked on other efforts that also have migrations? I think a lot of those have been answered as like there may be some parallel migration efforts that we can do, but it's not necessarily blocking control plane. I think I agree that like job needs to be moved over though, because like of the thing Ben mentioned where control plane or a repo should not have more than one like Proud control plane acting on it. So that's the riskiest part, and I think it's something that we'd want to test out with like a low risk repo first in order to like smooth out any issues, and then hopefully scale that up into moving other things over repo by repo. Yeah, I think that's about it. Mostly just this doc is open for comments. So like, I think we want to get like a really high level idea of like, are there concerns or other like things that we need to pay attention to, questions to answer, things that people like want to make sure are addressed, and then use that to outline like a timeline and a plan for like getting this started with one repo and then carrying it over to like, how do we finish this out with everything?
Before I ask something, anyone has a question, or we basically want to take this async? Because I feel like a lot of things were basically written in the doc. I don't think there's any more conversation.
I just want to add one comment to that, right? In 2022, I rebuilt the Kennedy Prow plane, right? And it was a very interesting exercise. Yeah, so in other words, I built a fresh cluster and like moved the components over and deleted all the cluster, right? And it was a bit messy, right? With little docs out there. I think I might have left some notes on what I did somewhere on Slack, so I need to dig it up. But that's effectively what we need to do at some point. And it's a little bit sketchy. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Is this employer shutdown of the control plane? Because I think that basically my only ask to Prod will be to know if we can do a live migration without employer shutdown. That's basically, the rest is kind of straightforward, but that's my big question, is like, can we do a migration without implying a shutdown of the club of basically proud.case.io?
I think that's a good question. I think there is going to be. I don't think we want to shut down the current control plane in the K8s-Infra project until everything is migrated over. In terms of swapping a repo from being under one to another control plane, I think that regardless, we're going to have to risk either duplication or not having a Prow active for a short amount of time. Ideally, that would be minimized, but that's my at least understanding. And like we also, again, I would want some kind of validation that can run when we have swapped over in order to ensure that things are in a good state and we're not acting like without a proper Prow instance for like too long. But I think I think we can make it so that we can effectively have a good like swap / rollback, hopefully. But I think we have to do a cutover at some point. Arno or Ben, whichever.
Ben, go for it.
Oh, so I wanted to bring up two things. One, just as a general call to action, there's a lot of mechanics around this that still have to be sorted out. Like Arno has a doc cross-linked from here that brings up about the buckets that we write logs to. There's also the mechanics of things like all of the interval-based jobs that have jitter in their timing because of when the config went into the cluster. And if you do a cold boot of the config, then we may mass schedule almost like a huge amount of jobs that we can't actually do, things like that. So input from anyone and everyone with ideas and experience around Prout is welcome. This can be developed, and we'll need some thinking through before we actually do it. It totally in parallel to dealing with migrating jobs to the community resources and figuring out what to do with the jobs that we can't and how to communicate that. I think actually migrating the whole Kubernetes Prout is going to be a fairly significant undertaking that needs some planning first, and we should continue iterating on that while we sort out like how we handle the job migrations. Also, folks here should be aware there's a not strictly related but kind of related effort to move the Prow source code out to the Kubernetes SIG's Prow repo, undergoing in SIG testing, and there's a lot of potential overlap there. So if you're interested, please go take a look and help us sort that out.
I'll put the link on of the doc in the meeting notes and also in the migration plan. But I think I basically say this is my question: what's the downtime of what's the migration? That implies establishing the migration process. But we identifying one blocker, which is the prior job migration. So I think we should focus on that, trying to move the needle about this close to where we want to be, which means identify those in need of specific credentials. And at the same time, SIG testing / Infra to try to figure out the migration without a shutdown, if possible. Or if we need a shutdown, yeah, okay, we can communicate ahead to the community and say, okay, we're going to take an entire day, because 1 hour is like best case scenario. Anything can go wrong. So if you tell me, oh, we have shut down for 24 hours, that would be great. But if not, we need to know.
Yeah, agree on that.
Yeah, and there's some overloaded we here because there's multiple parties. I think K8s-Infra is most directly responsible for sorting out the job migration blocker. But I suspect a number of us just putting on SIG testing will be over figuring out the migration plan. And that is also a pretty big blocker that needs sorting out. We don't want to just YOLO that one.
Yeah, I think that's
we run a lot of jobs and we want to try to make it. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. Even if we have like a day downtime or something, this is an important move for the project, and we all only have so much time to sort this out. We don't have to have the perfect plan, but we should try to have a good workable plan. The worst thing is we don't want to wind up in like a half out state where we're trying to like roll it back or something without a good plan for that. There's a lot of state and different things like the GitHub config and whatnot that we have to coordinate to do this. And I'm hoping folks like Mohammed that have done similar moves before can help weigh in on making sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot and have that plan written up before we try to, and that can keep moving while we figure out how we handle the remaining jobs. I'm going to drop a link in the chat here. By the way, Ricky has created a really helpful list in the comments of this doc about what concretely is blocking for the jobs as far as the SIG is concerned.
Yeah, job migration is mostly basically is driven by Ricky, and I'm trying to shadow him and trying to help him. And basically, I think basically to this entire group, we should all help him to basically do that, like trying to identify how we can either migrate or talk to SIG about job migration, because I think it's important. Because if this is a blocker and we kind of not moving forward about this, we will do this proud control plane migration in 2025. So I think basically because we need to give a good head start to communicate about the shutdown, because people will always comment about basically say, oh yeah, you want to do that on this day. We don't know what's the release plan going to look like in 6 months. So yeah, I think we should try to make sure if we want to do that this year, we should basically solve all current blockers. Basically the blocker we identify.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily a shutdown. We have options. We need to explore those. I'm just saying that I don't think we need to overstretch ourselves on not having one. Like, yes, people will be bothered, but like, I mean, outages can happen with our infrastructure that we didn't plan for anyhow. We don't have an SLA or like a 24/7 staffed on call or anything like that. We should do our best and make a good plan. But if that plan means that like a day or two of downtime, we'll deal with it. The project is operating on a huge amount of goodwill and resources here, and it's kind of amazing that we've had as little interruptions as we've had thus far. And this will be a pretty big transition to making sure that everyone in the project has input on making sure things run smoothly going forward. But we have to get over that gap. Also, just thank you, Ricky, for pushing hard on the migration. That has been awesome. And thank you, Michelle, for showing up and working on the prom migration doc. That's going to be a tricky one.
Yeah, no, I've seen like several of y'all showing up in the SIG testing meetings and asking about this. So thanks for keeping the momentum going on that. Hopefully we get a good start on it this year.
Any question? Because we 28 minutes left. We should probably continue. Thank you, Michelle, for coming. Hope to see you again. Mohammed.
Let's see.
My hand is raised. I'm trying to remove that. Okay. My hand raised.
All right, I'll ignore that. All right, so for me, a couple of priorities before keep on. I want to take Okta SSO to production soon. And I've been a bit distracted with a few things, but I kind of want to get that done as soon as possible. The other thing I wanted to do was buy some GCP compete commits. I think we've spoken about this privately with the leads, what that looks like, et cetera, et cetera. I think this conversation has been going on for 2 months now, so I would like to go ahead and do that.
Do we have an estimate?
Yeah, I shared some rough numbers. Let me dig up the messages and put them on the thread. 1 second.
Yeah, I think the one thing is like for context, we did a test before beginning of the year. It was working. We can credit support what is the name? Flexible commits. So I think the idea is to make that happen for 2024, covering the entire GCP organization. So now is more like we just need to know how many we want to commit this year.
The other thing that kind of went along with that is you're able to buy Google Cloud support as well. It is, I believe, 3% of our cloud usage, a small monthly fee. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like a separate thing. I think we should just
Separate thing. Yeah. Okay. Let me get a commit on the thing. Let's see. Now I'm gonna snip something and shove it in the dock.
Sorry, I didn't catch in the notes, and I didn't catch with my ears. What was the other thing that we can also do?
We can buy Google Cloud support. As
Oh,
a
interesting.
yeah, you can. If you go to the Billy console, you can see it. In the picture, it talks about VMware Engine. You can ignore that bit. But if you have space for it, we could buy that too while we're at it. So I stuck a screenshot in there from a message I wrote up. But yeah.
I don't have a problem about basically buying the commitment. I just have a problem with the number because last year we didn't spend 1 million in compute. So I felt like we're gonna ultimately overcome it. So I don't know what's the impact on that.
Overcommitting is
Right.
good because now you can spend more compute, right? I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
we
but I think I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with the number. It's more like last year we didn't spend 1 million. And this year, I'm not sure because we are moving a lot of stuff on EKS. So
we did spend 1 million in like 2021 and maybe 2022 as well.
We reduced scale testing under the crunch last year, and we have mostly been trying to get it working on AWS before we ramp back. So it's hard to say.
yeah,
We also, I mean, that we'll be continuing to migrate jobs, and some of those will be on GCP that just like don't work on EKS because they're testing with GCP clusters, and we only have so much bandwidth. But I guess we should be a little careful with the number because like they aren't totally interchangeable for us, right? We have other significant things that are non-compute that we care about funding. And we also have kind of flexibility at the moment to move compute between. Compute is one of the ones that's easier for us to move usually between the vendors. We've had a history of it being very challenging to suddenly shift like traffic spend.
yeah, because we are not.
If 1 million is too high, I'm more than happy to maybe do 750, or even 500,000.
Yeah,
I
half a
think
million will be. Yeah, I think I can basically agree based on what I saw on the billing platform. Like basically 500,000 will be good enough because if you basically look at basically the three last year, compute cost is just decreasing over the years, and we have now EKS, which take now a lot of compute. So 1 million might be overcommit. I don't know what's the meaning of doing an overcommitment.
I'm a little difficulty ignoring the part we said we'd ignore, the VMware bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right? Like that VMware spend is very tiny and it will solve your VMware credential headache too.
yeah, but we come back to the question about policy resources. Like, do we want to like?
It's more
So
that
it's
the community was never operating those, and that I don't think we should be in the business of doing that. I think if we're going to do vendor specific testing, the vendors need to provide resources, and we shouldn't like it's always going to be a tricky thing to balance the return on investment for how we choose to utilize the community's resources. But I think one of the worst choices we can make is telling vendor foo that we're using their resources to sponsor testing specific to vendor bar that doesn't benefit the community at large. That's a
okay.
pretty terrible place for us to be in. And I don't think it also, even if you ignore that aspect, I don't think it really benefits the project at large very much. Like if you point to something like the scale tests, that winds up kind of affecting a lot of the project because we're evaluating the performance of our core components. So um and that has to run somewhere, right? And so we have a bunch of things that are like that wind up using some vendor specific ish tooling because we have to actually run clusters, and like kind clusters can't solve everything. But I have not seen that any of those jobs are testing something that affects anything other than the cloud provider implementation. And if we can't get by with fakes for that, then I kind of think the vendor should provide it. I mean, imagine if we extend this to more vendors, right?
Yeah, sorry, Ben. Ben, Mario has his hands raised. We have 10 minutes left, so
Sure.
we give
All right,
him
so for the
Mario.
commit, let's go with 750,000 for now.
That was the spend of last year, so I think we should go even lower than that.
I mean, what I wanted to say is basically we don't need to basically reserve all of the instances right now. I mean, we can start with a lower amount and then see after we moved Prow, for example, if what are the numbers, and then can reserve to a later point again. So it's not like that we need to reserve all of or put all of our reserves right from the start. So basically start with a lower number and then figure out if this is enough, or if we see a lag, and revisit this every quarter or every half a year.
The problem
do
with that is like this is a 1-year commitment. So we if you try something,
Yeah.
if you try that, we have to wait basically next year to see what's happening. That's why I want to start with a low number, like 500K this year, because that's a baseline, and we can look at the data and know this is guaranteed that we use that. And next year we say, okay, we migrate Prow, and we come back again, priority, we migrate Prow, most of the Prow job I migrate, and we can say 2025, we can commit 1 million.
I like that a lot. It isn't just the migrating Prow, it's like the package traffic and things. We still have some kind of big ticket items in flux this
Yeah.
year. So if we do like a 500K commit, and then we can evaluate how effective it is and sort of where our resource spends comes out, then we can make a more optimal commit next year, but at lower risk. And we still wind up being hopefully more efficient than we were with our compute spend last year.
Yes. Okay.
All right, sounds good. In that
yeah.
case, I will go with a 1-year commit. That is worth just a little bit less than $5,000.
Yeah, okay. I mean, just ping us again on Slack. We can rediscuss that and figure out the final number. Yeah, that's it. For GCP support, I think we should check with him if credit support that. I don't know. So I think we can check that async. If I would like to buy a GCP support, because I think we need that, but I don't exactly know how this is working for the credit. Bob, you might help us on this. Trying to figure out internally if create basically GCP support by the credit. I feel like Ben, we're gonna say no, but yeah, let's follow up async.
As far as I know, it's gonna be a no.
Okay, yeah.
I think Bob and I are supposed to do that to the extent we can.
Yeah. And I have tried to get in various things when accounts are messed up, but
I also know a fair bit about how this works on the other side, but I'm not sure how much of it's public, so I'm a little hesitant to dive in.
I will leave you digging into the amazing I would say land of politics inside Google. So if you tell me it's no, that's fine. So
I meant like support tiers and stuff.
Yeah, we can, even we don't currently the situation, we don't currently have support, and I think we should at least get standard, because sometimes we might have issue we want to report and try and do some investigation. And even if that is a no, that's fine, but we should try to get the minimum support.
If it's like a bug or something, then Googlers and the community can file that more directly. If it's not that, I'm not sure why we would. And I mean,
Okay, let's do something simple. Figure out if it's possible with the credit first. If
Should
not,
be.
yeah.
It's definitely active on another CNCF project that I manage. So yeah, it's definitely doable.
Okay.
So the question is it paid by the credit or is it paid by CNCF
Paid by
through
the
the credit
credit.
card? Okay.
Because it's another SKU
So-
that appears on the line item.
Okay, so
As long as you have credits, it'll work.
okay, so Bob, I can pay you with wine, cheese, anything you want. Try to figure out something internally.
I will tell you, not necessarily me, but how to get Jeef to do anything. And that's bribing with croissants.
Okay. Yep, no problem. I will take care of that when Chief is coming. Wow. Marco, go for it. You can skip whatever. We can skip my items. It's like mostly TLDR.
Okay, now let's do it quickly. So EKS cluster, the stability issues that we had should be finally fixed. The reason why we had these stability issues in the first place is that we had one node group across 3 availability zones, and basically there is some process that's called AZ rebalance, and autoscaling group can on its own outside the EKS cluster autoscaler delete node without respecting pod disruption budgets and everything else to make sure that we have like same number of nodes across availability zones. We had like close to 2,000 of those processes for 6 weeks. So this is why the cluster was so unstable. And this is fixed by creating like 3 different autoscaling groups and node groups. And basically there is only one availability zone for each of those autoscaler groups. Cluster autoscaler supports that as well, and that fixed the issue. We also had a storage with like GP3 volume that was maxed out with IOPS and throughput and everything else. But since we switched to Bottle Rocket Linux, that volume is not even used. So we accumulated the charge that it was useless. So I just went ahead and removed that volume because we have SSDs for the instance type that we use. So yeah, those IOPS and throughput that we buy from ABS is useless. We have also, I think that we can consider EKS cluster critical if it remains stable. Let's give it one more week since we finished all rollouts today. And if it remains stable for that time, we can next week declare it critical and run release blocking jobs on it. GK cluster is, however, in not that good state because it is affected by some other stability issues as well. I briefly spoke with Mohammed about it. I also took a quick look into it. We should probably come with some plan. How are we going to fix it? Mohammed said he will take a look. I'm also offering to help and take a look as well and try to figure out what's going on. And yeah, this is probably the next more critical thing that we should look into.
I have a question. Like, what's the benefit of running release blocking on EKS compared to GK?
I mean, it's possible. It has been requested by some folks. There's a PR open. So
No, I think my question is not the possibility, it's more like the benefit of doing that because I feel like it's running fine on GK. Why move that to EKS? Or do we want to
honestly
do
don't
it?
see benefits.
Yeah, because I
Like-
feel like I don't have a strong opinion, but I think we should basically look at what are we gaining for running on EKS. I also think like 1 week is short because with EKS for the last 3 months, every time we solve a problem, another problem is coming, like in like the 2 next week. So I'm like, maybe.
So separately from the specifics of the clusters and the vendors, we're coming up on kept freeze, code freeze, test freeze. We should probably not let it trend close to code freeze to make a change like that. If it starts getting a code freeze, we should back off for that. It is really frustrating as someone for people working in Kubernetes when we break CI going into code freeze and they can't get things merged before code freeze, and it is pretty disruptive to the release process. We should if it gets close to code freeze, then we should hunt until the next release cycle. We usually try to make big changes at the beginning of a release cycle. I'm not sure if this is big enough for that, but we definitely shouldn't do it like close to code freeze or after code freeze.
Code freeze is
Well-
like in a month. So
I would just like to clarify one thing. So this is not about moving jobs. We are not going to move jobs. It is only going to open possibility for folks once the cluster is critical to run such jobs. It is up to job owners if they want to do it for any reason.
Right,
but
right.
From our side, from SIG K8s-Infra, yeah, we just open possibility.
But it's actually SIG testing tooling for the critical jobs or not, and by not letting people schedule things there, we're effectively preventing anyone from making that sort of change. And I think we send the wrong signal if we flip that gate close to code freeze. If we flip it in the next like short time window, sure, but if it's within a week of code freeze happening, we should stop and wait till the next cycle.
So we only have the month of February to do that switch if you want to do it.
I'm saying also reserve the week leading up. Don't do it in the week leading up. There will be a lot of PRs trying to squeeze in.
There's a PR that Ricky dropped in the chat. Basically, this is the PR that I was talking about. So yeah, we can discuss it there. I will propose that we bring it there in the visuals like async.
Also, with my SIG testing hat, I would recommend if we don't make that deadline that we wait like at least a few days or maybe a week after after we lift the merge requirements, because it will be hard to tell how well it's working, because everything is going to be slammed from the backlog of PRs. So it may look like it's having problems when it's just the whole system's getting slammed. If we wait another couple days or a week, then we'll be in a clean time window again.
Okay, let's follow that async. For Carpenter, I don't know someone in the AWS team. I know someone as a solution architect. I can tag him on Slack and say, oh yeah, we need help on this. But I would say tag James if we need someone, because you might reach out to people internally and find you someone interested to investigate your issue or your transition from a cluster autoscaler to Carpenter.
I can be really good at
Carpenter, right? We are rolling that out at work, and it's, let's just say, an interesting journey, right? I anticipate we're gonna run into exactly the same problems that I'm running into at work.
Okay, in that case, can you, Marco, I would say open a thread on K8s-Infra. We tag people and we have those conversations. Mohammed, that might be an opportunity to talk to someone from the EKS/Carpenter team and bring that feedback in internally inside your job, so we get a good feedback loop and trying to solve Marco problem.
Sounds good.
Marco, do you have a tentative date when you want to do this? I know we're a bit over time, but have you got a date in mind when you want to do this?
I think we need to identify. I think we need to identify the technical blocker before we establish a transition date.
Yeah, I would like that we do a sort of investigation, let's say as soon as possible, like upcoming days, and see because I went through some docs, I identified potential blockers, and it would be also nice to cite with what you discovered. And I can, for example, tomorrow create a thread, we do some quick discussions, collect what we have, and then try to find some EKS or Carpenter folks and pass it to them. Ideally, we could have some idea by KubeCon about how are we going to do this migration. But yeah, that's what we plan.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'm stopping the recording, so